The Quran claims that Allah made the earth as it is today in 6 days. This is wrong.
Is it really wrong? Let's take a look. The Quran says that God created the universe in 6 days, just like the Bible. But there's a really important difference. The Bible adds a seventh day. The Quran rejects the seventh day in the strongest terms possible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِن لُغُوبٍ, which means that we have surely created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and everything in between them as well, without any weariness, any fatigue, even touching us. There was no rest. There was no seventh day. This is God's cosmos.
So the Bible describes God as a human being. He works hard, gets tired and rests. But the Quran corrects that.
Yes, and that's what we've understood, Muslims have understood throughout history. But I think that today, when we read this verse and its rejection of the seventh day, it tells us something else that's really important.
What's that?
Well, remember from the previous episode, we saw how the fact that the Bible mentions a seventh day places it into conflict with modern science?
Yes, you explained that the Jewish Sabbath on Saturday comes from the fact that God rested on the seventh day of creation. And that's why for almost all of history, almost every Jew and Christian has understood the 6 days to be 6 24-hour days.
Exactly. There's the Jewish Sabbath, 24 hours. Because if there is a seventh day and God rested on that day, and Jews rest on that day as well, and that day is 24 hours, then that means that the rest of the 6 days are also 24 hours. And that closes the door to interpreting the 6 days of creation in the Bible as anything other than a literal interpretation of 24 hours. And that literal interpretation is confirmed even more by the detailed day-by-day description of what exactly was created on each 24-hour day. And that has led to a large number of contradictions with modern science, Big Bang, cosmology. I talked about them in the previous episode. But now when we come to the Quran and we find that the Quran rejects the seventh day, what that does is it leaves the interpretation of 6 days as 6 periods of times as an open possibility. Not only is it an open possibility, it's actually a widespread usage even before the revelation of the Quran. That's why many scholars, they said that the 6 days in the Quran means 6 periods of time.
So Muslim scholars have interpreted the 6 days as 6 long periods of time, even before the discoveries of modern science?
Yes, this is an ancient interpretation. The most famous dictionary of Quranic vocabulary is called Mufradat Alfaz al-Quran. It's by a scholar called Al-Raghib al-Asfahani. He explained the meaning of this word in his dictionary 900 years ago, way before the dawn of modern science, in a time when Jews and Christians, they all believed that the 6 days of creation in the biblical account, they're all 24-hour days. He was a exegete and a philologist, and he talked about the word yawm. And he said that the word yawm, day, in the ancient Arabic language, it was used by the ancient Arabians to refer to the time from sunrise to sunset. But he said it was also used by the ancient Arabians, even before the revelation of the Quran, for any period of time. It's actually used in that way in the Quran itself. There's a verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِنَّ يَوْمًا عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ كَأَلْفِ سَنَةٍ مِمَّا تَعُدُّونَ, which means that surely a day with your Lord is like 1,000 years of your reckoning. What's this verse saying? This verse, if you read it in context, is describing how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes certain things happen in the universe so that other things can happen. And there's a great divine plan, and the things that happen in the universe are unfolding according to that plan. But the time scale of that plan is huge. It's far greater than we can imagine. We think in terms of 24-hour days because we live for a very short period of time. But on a cosmic scale, you have to think in larger terms. That's why a day in this cosmic plan that is unfolding in the universe, a period of time in which something happens, is like 1,000 years. Keep in mind that this doesn't mean that the 6 days of creation are each 1,000 years long, but on the cosmic scale, we need to think in much longer periods of time, like 1,000 years. It's not talking about the 6 days of creation, and it's not even saying that a day is 1,000 years, that it equals 1,000 years. It's saying that days with God are like 1,000 years, i.e., they're really long with respect to us, just as 1,000 years is really long with respect to us. The point here is just to illustrate that a day can be much more than 24 hours, even in the Quran. There's actually another verse in which it describes a day like 50,000 years. So if you look back at the verses that talk about God creating the heavens and the earth in 6 days, it's talking about the creation of the universe, this divine plan that's unfolding. It makes a lot of sense for those 6 days to be 6 periods of time, 6 epochs. In fact, one of the most influential exegetes in Muslim history, his name is Al-Qadi Al-Baydawi, his tafsir for hundreds of years has been the most important tafsir exegesis studied in Muslim seminaries all over the world. He preferred this interpretation.
But the other meanings are still possible, right? Do the exegetes also say that the 6 days could be 6 regular days, just like in the Bible?
Well, remember that in the Arabic language, the literal meaning of day is the period from sunrise to sunset. That's not 24 hours. It's normally about 12 hours. That's the literal meaning. But all of the Muslim exegetes agreed that that literal meaning could not have been intended.
Because when the universe was being created, there was no sun, nor any earth for it to rise and set on in the first place.
That's right. The idea of day comes from our human experience of sunrise and sunset. That human experience was not possible when the universe was being created because there was no earth, there was no sun. I want you to notice how the Muslim exegetical tradition is a completely different world than the biblical exegetical tradition, because the Bible adds a 7th day of rest, and because that's the Jewish Sabbath, the biblical tradition has traditionally been bound to a 24-hour interpretation for days of creation. It's completely different here. So they all agreed that the literal meaning is not intended, and then they gave many figurative interpretations, and they gave many different possible meanings.
Why so many possible meanings?
Because they didn't have enough information to work with. They tried their best. They used linguistic meanings, contextual indicators. They tried their best to give what they thought the word yawm or day meant in this context, but all of them agreed that they could be mistaken. None of them said that my interpretation is the definitive, unchallengeable interpretation of the Quran here. And if they'd been alive today and they knew how the universe has evolved as we know now, they would have factored it into their interpretation, and they would have all said that 6 days is 6 epochs. That's the nature of the Muslim scholarly tradition. It's open, it's rational, and it's honest.
So if Muslim scholars knew what we knew today, they all would have said that it would be 6 long periods of time, not 6 days.
Yes, and you can see that in the verse. What's the verse saying? There's many verses that say that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. It's saying that God created the universe gradually. there were 6 stages of the universe's development. First, it was one way, then it changed into another way, then God changed it into another way, and so on. So there's 6 stages of development, and these 6 stages took place on a cosmic scale. So there's 6 epochs. That's what the verse is saying. It's 6 long periods of time. So the verses that say that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, what they're saying is that after these 6 stages, 6 epochs, the universe, the sun, the moon, the stars, it arrived at some kind of a completion, so that somebody, a human being, could stand on earth, look up at the sky, look around him, and say that the earth, the sun, the stars, they're all complete. They behave in the way that they behave now.
So how long would the 6 epochs be?
Let's try and work it out. Scientists tell us that the universe began to exist 13.8 billion years ago. The first stars and galaxies appeared around 400 million years after that, and our solar system appeared about 8.5 billion years after that. That's about 9 billion years. That's the earliest that someone could stand on our planet and look up at the heavens and the earth and say that they've reached some kind of a completion in the sense that we experience now. If you add the amount of time that the earth actually became habitable and the first human beings appeared, you'd add a little bit more time. That gives us an ballpark figure of 9, 10, 11, 12 billion years. It's around that amount of time, and so it's a really long amount of time. And that means that the 6 epochs, each one of them is also a very long amount of time. It doesn't have to be the same amount of time, because what's meant by an epoch in this context in the Quran is a particular stage of the universe's development. So the thing that defines an epoch is not a quantity of time, but it's the completion of a stage of development. So I think that if they're all together 9 billion years, then each epoch is going to be probably on the scale of 1 billion years. I don't think there's any way for us to know for sure, but that's okay. Because the point of the verse is not to tell us an exact period of time. The point of the verse, as Baydawi and other exegetes explain, is for us to see God's power and knowledge in action. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have created the universe in one shot, just like that. But if He did, we wouldn't be able to see what we see now. If the universe came into existence through a series of carefully staged creations, each stage carefully fine-tuned to lead into the next stage of tremendous complexity, all in accordance with the regularities, the laws of nature that God has placed in the universe, you can see how powerful God is, how knowledgeable God is, how skillfully He creates the universe. If the universe had been created in one shot, we wouldn't be able to see that. Our modern scientific discoveries fit perfectly with the point of this verse. We've discovered, for example, that the elements on our planet Earth that we need for life, these elements were created when certain specific kinds of stars ended their lives according to a very special kind of supernova explosion. And this is needed to happen many times in order for the elements of life on planet Earth to be produced. That's why you and me were actually made, as people say, of stardust. This is just one example of a scientific discovery that has revealed the gradual step-by-step evolution of the universe over 13.8 billion years into its present form, into you and me. And these scientific discoveries powerfully reveal the knowledge and the power and the skillful creation of God that the Quran is getting at when it says that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. When we plug our scientific discoveries into our understanding of what the universe is, and then we read that God created that universe in 6 stages, those scientific discoveries are a perfect fit. Can you see how plugging them in strengthens the rhetorical force of this verse?
Absolutely. It's amazing. It looks like we were meant to see this.
Yeah.
It looks like the one who is speaking in the Quran is the one who created the universe.
Absolutely. And you haven't even begun to see the really amazing verses yet.
Let's talk about that in the next episode.
Let's do that. If you like this episode, then check out my Why Islam is True course, in which I teach you 4 rational arguments that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself used to show that Islam is true. Learning on YouTube is great, but if you want to reach a learning goal, a learning destination, like how to make rational arguments, how to think critically as a Muslim, how to engage with modern science as a Muslim, then you need to follow a map that's been specifically designed to take you to your learning goal, step by step, through a series of carefully designed learning objectives and learning activities that take you to your final learning destination. That's how this course has been designed. This course shows you the what, the why, and the how. It shows you what we believe as Muslims. It shows you why those beliefs are based on evidence and 100% true based on Quranic rational arguments. And it shows you how to use those arguments to address common objections against Islam by atheists and others on topics such as evolution, the problem of evil, the age of Aisha, and much more. It consists of 20 modules, and it includes bi-weekly live sessions with me, pre-recorded lessons with 81 bite-sized videos, 247 application activities and real-world scenarios, a 24/7 community where you can ask a question and get it answered within 24 hours, and there's an option to buy a course textbook as well. Find out more at www.whyislamistrue.com/course and learn why Islamic seminaries are adopting this course as part of their curriculum to train the next generations of scholars. This course is actually the first and prerequisite course in the Basira Classical Curriculum in Modern Context, a 4-year curriculum consisting of 31 courses that will teach you everything that a Muslim needs to know about their deen and be ready for modern society. This 4-year Basira seminary curriculum is based entirely on the Muslim scholarly tradition, but it teaches you how to apply that tradition to the world in which we live, and it's taught completely in English. Why Islam is True is the first course in that 31-course curriculum. Check it out at www.whyislamistrue.com/course.